Can you turn on some lights and close this?
Sure.
Hare Krishna. Uh, First of all, please accept my humble obeisances. Vanchakalpa Tirasha Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patana Pavani Vyo Vaishnavi Vyo Namo Namo. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Putale Shimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gurvani Trani Nirishi Sasundari Prasad Siddhaya. Hare Krishna. Uh, First of all, my tremendous thanks to Radha Govinda Prabhu for inviting me to speak. And I apologize that I probably won't be able to attend the, the program, even on Zoom, uh, largely because of the time difference. So I'm making this video. I hope it will suffice. Uh, when Radha Govinda Prabhu told me that uh, the temple was getting a murti of Srila Prabhupada to install, I was really happy to hear that Lochan Prabhu was the sculptor, the person who made the murti, because these days there are many different devotees making murtis of Prabhupada. But my opinion is that Lochan Prabhu is and always has been the best for making Prabhupada murtis. So you can be sure you're getting the best. Regarding Srila Prabhupada, my relationship with Srila Prabhupada, etc. Radha Govinda Prabhu suggested that I could say how I met Srila Prabhupada. I always get confused when devotees ask me this because I don't feel like I ever actually met Srila Prabhupada. I wasn't one of the people who would, sit across from Prabhupada and ask him questions and have talks with him and things like that. I was very, very far in the background. And my relationship with Srila Prabhupada was mainly through his disciples. Uh, and it's a testimony to Srila Prabhupada's greatness that his greatness shines through his followers, his disciples and other followers. I was so impressed with Prabhupada's disciples when I met them. And that's the first way I really had a relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Second way, uh, it was through his books. Mostly my relationship with Srila Prabhupada was through studying his books and distributing his books. Uh, but in the very beginning, when I was associating with devotees, before I had actually committed to being a devotee or living in a temple, uh, I read one line in one of Srila Prabhupada's books. I don't remember which book, but it really struck me. It was so powerful. Srila Prabhupada said, "This world is a world of birth, death, disease, and old age." And I thought, bingo, finally somebody's telling me the truth. Because the materialists were always telling me that uh, there's nothing wrong. You just have to become better at material things. You have to get more money. You have to get bigger muscles. You have to comb your hair in a different way. You have to dress differently, et cetera, et cetera. And I was trying those things, but I still wasn't happy. And then, out of frustration, I turned to the impersonalists. So they also told me that there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with this world. It's fine. The only problem is you haven't yet realized that you are God. So I thought, oh, okay. So I went about trying to realize that I was God. Uh, I lived in an impersonalist ashram with five other people, and we were all trying to realize that we're God, and preferably before the others realized that they're God. Um, so when I read this line, because that also wasn't satisfying me, I thought, if everything's okay, why do I not feel okay? But when I read that line, this world is a world of birth, death, disease, and old age, that just hit the mark. It really touched the chord. And uh, the third thing was the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Uh, in the beginning, I didn't really have any concept of Srila Prabhupada as a person, but it just didn't, uh, it just didn't register with me. I didn't think of him as the author of these books. I didn't think of him as a person. Once one of the devotees showed me a photo of Srila Prabhupada, and which he looked, what to me looked really grim. And I thought, whoa. I said to the devotee, I said, he doesn't look very spiritual. Because in those days, I mean, I had just recently been a hippie, and we were following one chubby little so-called guru from India. And the thing was that all these impersonalist yogis and gurus who were coming to America at that time, this was 1971, uh, they all smiled a lot. And we all we all had this idea that anyone who smiles is good, is okay. Anyone who doesn't smile is probably a narcotics agent working for the government or something else bad. So that was one of our criteria, was he has to smile. So when I saw this photo, I, it may have been the first photo I saw of Srila Prabhupada, and he wasn't smiling. He looked, he looked really unhappy, like grim, like, yeah, like really, really unhappy. And I mentioned that to the devotee. I said, well, he doesn't look happy at all. He doesn't look very spiritual. and and the devotee said, he said, no, he looks like that. It's not that he's not happy. It's because he's grave. I thought, oh, that's an interesting concept. That had never occurred to me. And I thought that was a reasonable explanation. The Prabhupada was grave. So yeah, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. I mean, it wasn't Prabhupada in one sense. It wasn't like I met Prabhupada and I became impressed with him and he overwhelmed me, and et cetera, which did happen to many devotees. But the main things were his disciples, uh, his books, the philosophy, and the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Only later did I understand that there was a person behind all this. Um, Radha Govinda Prabhu also asked me to suggest that I could say something about how it is that I've been able to dedicate my whole life to Srila Prabhupada's mission and go through so many austerities and difficulties. Uh, so at the time that I met the devotees, I was in this yoga ashram. But they were staying with us. And by their association, I became more and more attracted. So at one point, I went to the temple. I'd never been to a temple. I went to the temple just to visit. My plan was I was just going to stay a couple of weeks to uh, study the philosophy more, et cetera, and get a little bit more feeling for this Krishna consciousness. Um, but when I got to the temple, uh, well, it was a very active temple. At the time I got there in the afternoon, the devotees were out on Sankirtan. And they came back so fired up. I was amazed. And very quickly they were taking a shower, then taking prasadam. Then everybody had to be in the temple room at a certain time. There was a short Bhagavad Gita class. And then at 8 o'clock, back out on Sankirtan. And that Sankirtan in those days meant what we call now Harinam, and distributing some pamphlets or Back to Godhead magazines around the Harinam party. But it was so, to me, that Harinam party was so impressive. We were in a really, really degraded section of the city. There was so many lustful activities going on around us. But the Harinam party looked like it was a little bubble, like a transcendental bubble. And I saw that people were stopping, like stunned, like frozen, like involuntarily. And that confirmed what the devotees had been telling me, that the sound vibration goes straight to the soul, not through any intellectual or mental uh, channels, just goes straight to the soul. And I thought, these people have been captured, at least momentarily, by the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That was so impressive to me. And then devotees near the Sankirtan party were distributing some Back to Godhead magazines for people who were really interested. So the combination of the sound vibration and the philosophy, to me, this was the answer. Because for a long time, I had been trying to do something that would be good for my fellow man, some welfare for my fellow man. And I never found anything that really seemed to do the trick. The devotees had told me that this is, more than once, they had told me this is the highest welfare work. So, I sort of, intellectually, I suppose I understood, but I didn't really understand. But when I went on this Harinam party, I understood. This is the highest welfare work. And I decided right there, right then, this is how I want to spend the rest of my life. I didn't have any doubts at all. So in one sense, Srila Prabhupada was still, a very distant concept for me, vague at best. But this preaching, the book distribution, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, disseminating this to the public, this really touched my heart. Only later, I understood that Prabhupada, it was because of Prabhupada. Prabhupada was behind it all. So when we got back to the temple at 10 o'clock at night, a couple of brahmacharis were shaving their heads. And one of them said, you want to shave your head? I thought, well, this is how I want to spend the rest of my life, so okay. And I got my first shaved head. Gradually, I came to understand that there's a person behind this these books, this philosophy behind this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and who's empowering his disciples. But that took a little time. Um, One of the most significant experiences I had with Srila Prabhupada was in October 1977, more or less a month before he left his body. I went to Vrindavan with two other devotees to be with Srila Prabhupada. And we arrived in Vrindavan. It was more or less the middle of the night, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And everybody was asleep. Well, most people were asleep. Maybe a couple devotees may have been up chanting their rounds, but basically everybody was asleep. It was quiet. Uh, and we, with our luggage, before we even did anything else, we went right to Prabhupada's room. And when we got there, it was dark inside. And we walked in very carefully, left our bags outside, and walked in very carefully and quietly. And there was only one other devotee in the room, a sannyasi who was taking care of Srila Prabhupada. And we had heard how Srila Prabhupada's body was emaciated at that time, but when we saw it, it was so shocking to see Prabhupada's sunken cheeks, and he was just lying on his back on his bed, just like that, and his eyes were closed. He seemed to be asleep, and the sannyasi very graciously motioned us to come in the room and be quiet and just sit down. So we sat down, maybe, I don't know, a couple of meters away from Srila Prabhupada's bed, at the side of his bed. And then this sannyasi said to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, these boys have come all the way from America just to be with you. And Srila Prabhupada opened his eyes and he turned his head slightly and he said, like towards us, he said, "Oh, thank you very much. How are you?" And the three of us were just like, we were like aghast. We looked at each other like, how are we? We were all approximately 30 years old, in relatively good health, youthful, vibrant, active, et cetera, et cetera. Here, Srila Prabhupada his body was more or less just skin and bones. He was obviously very ill. And he's asking us, how are we? We felt so badly. We just felt like crawling under something. We felt so embarrassed. But for me, that was a really important lesson that even in such a difficult situation, such a painful situation, Srila Prabhupada was still concerned with others. That level of compassion was just, how do you say, unmatchable. Okay, Radha Govinda Prabhu told me to speak for 15 or 20 minutes. Now it's been 19 minutes. So there's a lot more I could say, but I'm out of time. So thank you very much. I hope there's something I said that will be of value to some of you. And I'm so happy to hear that Lochan's murti of Srila Prabhupada is going to be installed in ISKCON Porto. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
हरि स्वामी की जय।
Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki
जय
jai.
ओम विष्णु पदाय कृष्ण कृष्ण कृष्ण